The Independent Commission investigating the October mass shooting in Lewiston held its 8th public meeting today.
Retired Army Reserve Captain Jeremy Reamer, who was in command during Robert Card's time at the Reserve, testified for about 3 hours. Card carried out the shooting. Reamer's testimony recounted the events that took place in the months leading up to the tragedy. According to Reamer, Card was issued a mandatory psychological evaluation in July, resulting in 2 hospitalizations. While it was his responsibility to follow up and ensure Card was following discharge directions like medication, Reamer says he did not, nor did he delegate these responsibilities to anyone else. A friend of Card's in the Reserve, Sergeant Sean Hodgson, was delegated to organize Card's family to take his firearms following these hospitalizations. Due to a domestic violence charge, Hodgson could not personally handle firearms. It was not verified if the family did collect Card's firearms. Reamer testified he wishes he was more forward with finding out Card's medical follow-ups. Jamie Jordan, who was at Just in Time with her 3 children during the shooting, also testified to tell her story and voice her concerns after the fact.
So I think what would have been helpful would have been being a little bit more forward regarding his medical, like finding out his medical and the follow-ups and stuff, being a little bit more forward regarding that.
In the meeting in Lewiston, Tammy mentioned that there had been survivors that were forgotten, and my kids and I are some of those. Most of the information I have received about almost everything has been either through social media or passed along through the other bully moms that were there. Almost never direct contact from anybody.
Jordan went on to say that while dealing with the day-to-day after experiencing the shooting has been hard, not knowing where to turn with questions she's had has been hard.